The Montreal Canadiens had themselves an eventful week, and they only played one game. We'll break down the trade, we'll break down the signing, and of course their win over the Edmonton Oilers on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Julian McKenzie back here with you on another edition of Hockey Inside Out with the usual suspects. Montreal Gazette columnist Stu Cowan, Jessica Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal, and Rick Green, formerly of the Montreal Canadiens and former assistant coach. Let's get into it with the topics. It's been so long since the Montreal Canadiens played a game, 10 days off between games essentially. We know with the COVID incident, with what happened with adding Kotkaniemi and Armia to the list, and then just a flurry of activity after that. We'll start with the game on Tuesday first. The Montreal Canadiens defeating the Edmonton Oilers by a score of 4-0. What were your takeaways from that game?
Well, the week off certainly helped them. They were playing a tired Edmonton team, too, that was playing its third game in 4 nights and back-to-back. But you got to take advantage of those kind of teams, and that's what the Canadiens did. They came flying out. The goal 18 seconds into the game from Kotkaniemi, and then Lehkonen scoring. And then they just kept the pedal to the metal, as they say, and made it really difficult for the Edmonton Oilers. And again, that's 4 games this year against the Oilers, and Draisaitl and McDavid have yet to score a goal. So it was a really impressive performance. The Canadiens have had a problem this season with slow starts. This was a really good start, and they carried it forward, and it was one of their best games of the season, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think you're right on when you spoke about the fatigue factor, and Edmonton were quite flat, but you have to give it to the Canadiens. They knew what the Edmonton schedule had been like, and they came out of the gate on a mission, and they took it to them right away and put them back on their heels. And they really put a lot of doubt in Edmonton's goaltender by putting everything at them, and they were fortunate that they got a couple of bounces, but full credit to the Canadiens for coming out of the gate and setting the tempo and letting Edmonton know just exactly what they're into for this given night, and a huge win, obviously.
And there's a lot of questions coming into this game because they weren't able to skate. They couldn't use the practice facility in Brossard. They all just had to use their gyms at home. And having this break, will it hurt them or will it help them? And obviously it helped them having that kind of rest. I know Paul Byron even said, mentally it was nice to kind of have that break. It's not going to be very easy for them moving forward, but they came out, they had that start, and they didn't let Edmonton back into this game at all. The first period was great to watch, and then I was thinking, oh no, will they be able to keep this up? And they were, and that's exactly what they needed to do. And then the next step now is to keep this momentum going to see how far they can take them.
The other thing that impressed me was after the game, I asked a few of the players and Dom Ducharme during their video conferences if they were aware, the Oilers were tired, and that was in their pregame meetings, that they talked about how they had to jump on them. And they all said, we don't worry about them. Like, we worry about us. And that seems to be the common theme since Dom Ducharme took over this team, is that they're so focused and so confident on this system that Dom Ducharme has put into place that they think it's going to work against whoever they play. And that's admirable. I mean, Shea Weber said, they looked at video, obviously, to see, Weber and McDavid and Draisaitl and things they might do. But apart from that, they're just focused on their own system, working it out, getting it going. And it worked perfectly against Edmonton. So, they're more worried about themselves than they are worried about anybody else. And that's a sign of a good team.
And they're obviously not missing a beat when it comes to not being on the ice. And they're not going to be on the ice till the end of the year that much, my guess is, just because of the crazy schedule that they have coming their way. And, they're just going to have to find ways to be rested and fresh mentally and come out of the gate like they did last night. And it was a great start of the game and finish of the game. So they have to build from there and look how they can consistently start like that and put the other team on their heels. And like you said before, Stu, I know what it's like when you have a good team. You're not worried so much about the other team. You're aware of some of the guys that are real good players. But it's about how you're going to play and how you're prepared to put your A game out there. And, hopefully they understand that, because they are a good team. And when they're all playing, they make things happen. And I think it's a big bonus for them to start after a layoff like that, to see all the positives that they had, coming out of that game.
Yeah, Ducharme spoke about how they did a lot of video work during the week off. And I mean, you would know better than me, Rick, as a former assistant coach, that probably with system work, you can do just as much through video as you can on the ice, probably, about showing guys where they should be in certain situations and whatnot. So, kudos to Dominic Ducharme. He was thrown into a really tough situation here. Never had a practice even before his first game as head coach. But his system, the most important thing about his system is the players seem to be buying into it.
And I mean, it's one thing to think of a 10-day layoff for those players. Imagine what it must have felt like for Michael Frolik, who actually made his Canadiens debut in the victory over the Edmonton Oilers. What did you all think of his play?
I thought he looked good for a player who hasn't played in about a year. I'm sure he was dying to get that opportunity to go play with Montreal, and he looked good. He didn't look rusty. Talk about the Canadiens potentially being rusty after 10 days. But he's a depth player. He was an insurance policy when Marc Bergevin went and signed him in the offseason, kept him on the taxi squad for a situation like this. And he didn't do anything to harm the team. He looked good, and that's all you can ask for from a player like that.
Yeah, and I think in all fairness to him, it's really hard to gauge a kid, a young man, after not playing for so long. And he did log almost 12 minutes, and, he didn't really look out of place, but it's a tough situation stepping in after being, a practice player and drill player, and then, get into the mix as quickly as they brought him in. But it's part of the game. There's guys like that they have in their lineup that they're going to be able to bring in as a depth player, and he's going to fill the void, I think, for a short term. But, it's good to see that he was given an opportunity, and it's nice to know that he did not look really out of place.
I thought he looked just fine, especially as you guys said, for a guy who hadn't played an NHL game in over a year and had only played 2 games at the Rocket. Watching him at practices in Brossard this season, he's always the last guy on the ice for sometimes 20, 30 minutes after practice is over, doing skating drills, shooting drills, puck handling drills by himself. Things he's a veteran, so he's sort of like Corey Perry, right? He knows what to do, where to go. He's on a 4th line role, limited minutes. I thought he looked just fine out there. What's going to be interesting to see is when he starts getting some scoring chances, if he can still bury it. That's one of the problems the Habs have had on this 4th line with Jake Evans and Lehkonen and Byron and those guys. They work hard, create chances, but they can't finish. So once we see Frolik play a couple of more games, which I imagine we will, and he gets a couple of scoring chances, it's going to be interesting to see if he still has the hands to finish off.
And the big thing, too, about these veteran NHL depth players is they don't come in here having an ego, which they totally could. He's won a Stanley Cup before, but he understands his role. Kind of the same thing with Corey Perry as well. He understood what he was coming to Montreal for, and they don't come in here expecting much or causing any kind of drama, behind the scenes, wanting to have more playing time. And I think that's great for the Canadiens. You have a player who can be a good role model and help out your team when you need them.
And these guys are also working for, another contract. I mean, they want to keep playing, and they're in a situation where they have to perform in order for them to prolong their career. So there's a lot of motivation just in that, saying, hey, listen, if I am able to do something and the team likes it, then, I'll have a job next year. So I think that's a critical point in motivation for a lot of these guys that have 1-year contracts.
Yeah, and Frolik even said before the game that he was going into it looking at it like this could be his last game. Like he might not get another chance. And for a 33-year-old guy who, he's not playing for money anymore. He's made like $38 million in his career. He signed for $750,000. Similar situation to Corey Perry. They just love the game and they don't want to leave it. And Rick, I'm sure as a former pro athlete, it's a tough lifestyle to give up, I'm sure. And when you love the game as much as these guys do, they're not playing for money anymore. And Frolik is realizing, this could be his last chance. Corey Perry realized it could be his last chance also. I mean, they both only signed for $750,000 with no promises and told they were going to start on the taxi squad, and then it's up to them to prove themselves. Corey Perry did, earned a regular spot, and now Michael Frolik is going to be hoping to do the same thing.
And you always hear about how good a group the Montreal Canadiens are, and to be part of that is obviously a bonus. And those guys want to ride it to the max. And if they get a chance to win the ultimate, boy oh boy, great for them. So there's lots of things there that are positive in having a guy like that. And I'm quite sure that he's very excited just to be part of the Montreal Canadiens organization.
Yeah, and I spoke with his agent, Alan Walsh, who's a Montreal native, And he was telling me that Frolik has basically spent all his summers in Montreal since he was 18 years old. He played in the Quebec Junior League after he came over from the Czech Republic. He loves the city. He knows all the restaurants and the nice spots when they were open before COVID. But Walsh said that, it wasn't money when Frolik signed with the Canadiens. He wanted a chance to win, and he wanted to play in a city that he loves. And he loves Montreal, and he knows the city really well.
Let's stick with the veteran depth theme for a moment here, because the Canadiens added to that during their layoff when they acquired Eric Staal from the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for a 3rd and a 5th round pick. The Canadiens seem to be pretty good in those rounds for this upcoming draft class. Not to mention, they got the Buffalo Sabres to retain half of Eric Staal's salary. Panelists, I'll ask you this. What do you think of the acquisition, and where do you think he'll be used in this Montreal Canadiens lineup?
Well, I think we've heard over the course of the year how they were really lacking an experienced centerman. And when you get a guy like Staal, who he's a big guy, an experienced guy, he's been around, Stanley Cup winner, he's been around the mill a little bit, and he knows what it takes to win. And I'm quite sure he's quite excited to come into this Montreal Canadiens dressing room and know what he has to do. And he knows that they've struggled a little bit with some of the young guys in the face-off circle. So he's going to bring a positive, I hope, to the group.
Yeah, I'm sure he was waving goodbye to Buffalo in that situation as he was driving up. But it was what they needed. Similar to last year, we saw what Nate Thompson was able to do. Eric Staal coming in, he can help these young guys. They weren't necessarily progressing the way that everyone was hoping at the beginning of the season. And again, he's towards the end of his career, so he knows his role, and I think he could be a great, role model for these centermen. Pass on some really good hockey knowledge, and will just help take away some of the pressure that maybe a Nick Suzuki is feeling, or Jesperi Kotkaniemi after a few games that they didn't have before. So it's a great situation that Marc Bergevin was able to pull off that deal.
Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic move by Marc Bergevin. He stockpiled draft picks. He gave up a 3rd and a 5th. He still has 2 3rd-round picks and 2 5th-round picks in this year's draft. So he basically gave up nothing. Staal's going to come in here. He's going to take Jake Evans' spot. That's an upgrade on the 4th line. Dominic Ducharme spoke about how Evans can play wing also, so there might still be a spot for Jake Evans. But Nick Suzuki, they gave me against Edmonton. He won 19% of his faceoffs. They need another guy who can win some faceoffs out there. Staal fills that role. He's got a Stanley Cup. He's got an Olympic gold medal. He's got a World Championship gold medal. Last season he had 47 points with Minnesota. The only player on the Canadiens who had more points than him was Thomas Tatar. So the stats that he had this season in Buffalo, throw him out the window, because that's just what a dysfunctional franchise Buffalo has been. And as Jeff said, I'm sure he was so happy to drive out of that city and cross the Canadian border and join the Canadiens. So, another guy, as we mentioned about Frolik, he's not playing for money anymore. He wants to win. He's won a Stanley Cup before with the Hurricanes. The Canes were on his no-trade list. He said that was because he didn't really want to spend 14 days in quarantine sitting in a hotel and then try and come back and play. Once the quarantine was cut back to 7 days, he waived the no-trade clause. He's happy to be here. He's an upgrade on Jake Evans. He's going to make the Canadiens better. And the experience factor also, he was, just mentioned, helping Nick Suzuki. Jesperi Kotkaniemi talked about how much he's looking forward to playing with Eric Staal. So it's a really good move. And another veteran guy, another guy with the Stanley Cup ring, another guy who does all the right things. You hear players always talk about playing the right way. This guy plays the right way, character guy. So it's a really, really good move by Marc Bergevin. And he gave up nothing, and as just mentioned, Buffalo's paying half of his salary.
And you bring in another quality guy like that, he goes into the depth of your team. So the other guys know that they've got guys waiting in the wings to jump in there, and forces them to perform. And if not, they're going to be in a situation where they're going to have to do more watching than playing. So it's a win-win for the Canadiens.
I'm very impressed at the move, at how Marc Bergevin was able to acquire Eric Staal, and I'm equally impressed that none of you guys made a joke about how old the Montreal Canadiens look with this move, or how this team would have looked really good in 2010 or 2011, like some people did after this trade was done. Also, no jokes about the Buffalo Sabres being as bad as the Washington Capitals were when Rick Green was there. None of that. A lot of restraint from all of you guys on the Hockey Inside Out. A lot of restraint from you guys. I'm impressed.
We're professionals, Julian.
The thing is, though, Julian, people who are saying that, you got to realize they're not bringing Eric Staal in here to be a number 1 line center. They're not bringing, like, these guys are going to be fourth line players like Corey Perry that can move up when they're playing well or when other guys are struggling. They're not coming in here to be the key guys. They're coming in here to provide some experience and fill in the roles and play 10, 11 minutes a game. They're not expecting them to play 20 minutes a game and carry this team. They're expecting them to just help this team.
And you have to, call him an experienced player, not an old player. So.
Yeah, that was our mistake. Yes.
And Rick Green never trusts the forward, but he might trust Eric Staal.
Yeah.
I mean, Eric Stahl's a pretty good forward to trust, I would think.
I'm anxious really to see, what he does. I'm sure he's really excited to get in there and be part of this Montreal Canadiens group.
Hey, do you guys remember when Marc Bergevin told the media that he didn't have a lot of financial flexibility ahead of the trade deadline and made it seem as if it was going to be unlikely he was going to make a move? Those were some really good times, weren't there? Pretty good laugh. Pretty funny. Yeah, we've all learned our lesson from that. Now there's reports he's looking to shop Arturi Lehkonen. I think we mentioned him on a previous episode of Hockey Inside Out. What do you think of that? And do you really think Marc Bergevin will make another move before the trade deadline?
I wouldn't be surprised if Arturi Lehkonen ends up being traded from the Montreal Canadiens. As he mentioned, the reason why he can't really make any moves is because of the financial situation that the team is in right now, being right up against the cap. Trading Lehkonen will give him some breathing room. And Pierre LeBrun was saying on the Tuesday night's broadcast that there are teams that have called Marc Bergevin that are interested in Arturi Lehkonen. So Bergevin's doing his job, listening to what other teams are willing to offer for that player. And I think that if the situation makes sense for him and the Montreal Canadiens, I wouldn't be surprised if he's no longer here.
Yeah, I looked on capfriendly.com after the game Tuesday night, and the Canadiens' updated salary cap number was they had $292,000 under the cap. It's not a lot of money. So Bergevin has to clear up some space, and trading Lehkonen would make sense. I'm sure he'd like to trade Paul Byron. I don't know if anybody's going to take that contract, but Lehkonen is a restricted free agent after this season, so you're not taking on any further money on him. And he could be a valuable player on other teams. A hardworking guy, fourth line, kills penalties. He played really good Tuesday night against the Oilers, a goal and an assist. So, yeah, I'm sure he is. And don't forget, if they want to bring Cole Caufield up here later in the season, you got Eric Staal coming also. They got to clear up space, cap space. So Lehkonen, I think, is a guy that other teams would be interested and would possibly make a deal from. I don't think Bergevin is going to get much for him because other teams are going to know he has to get rid of salary. But yeah, I'm sure I'd be surprised if he's not trying to move Lehkonen, and he's probably maybe trying to move Paul Byron also, but that'll be a more difficult challenge.
Yeah, I think his number is up. I don't know what you're going to get for him. I don't think he draws a big price tag or player in that. And if Bergeron was using his name as trade bait. It obviously was a motivational factor with the way Lehkonen played. And but I mean, in the long run, in the big picture of things, I would seriously think that he's entertaining some thoughts in trying to free up some space. And what's it going to take to move a contracted player? And he'll do the math on it. And if something comes along that maybe makes sense financially and from a personnel standpoint, I'm quite sure that moving forward he would entertain anything.
Can't imagine. I mean, with Arturi Lehkonen, if it is true that the Montreal Canadiens are looking to shop him, can't imagine the return not being a defenseman, right? I think the Montreal Canadiens already solved their need at center with the Eric Staal trade. I mean, with Ben Sherrod obviously still injured for the foreseeable future, I would think that's the next place they would need help, right?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get a defenseman for Arturi Lehkonen. I think they're going to get maybe a draft pick, late round draft pick.
That's fair.
At the most. But yeah, I mean, if there's something else that Bergevin is looking for, it is a defenseman. But I mean, he didn't lie when he said that he was tight up against the cap and didn't expect to make a move. I mean, the trade with Staal doesn't happen if Buffalo doesn't keep half of his salary. So that's why that trade worked out. So I mean, the only deals I see him wanting to make moving forward is to get rid of money, and Arturi Lehkonen would be the most obvious guy to do that with.
Let's go to our final question here on Hockey Inside Out. You mentioned Cole Caufield. We've mentioned him on this show before. We know people are excited about it. 1 or 2 times maybe. Who cares? Cole Caufield, he signed his entry-level contract during that week where no Montreal Canadiens games happened and absolutely nothing happened in the world. I'm just kidding. Of course, stuff happened in the world. Cole Caufield is expected to make his pro debut with the Laval Rockets. So Joël Bouchard will get his first crack at him in the Montreal Canadiens organization. But I ask you all, when do you think we'll see Cole Caufield in a Canadiens uniform? Do we see him before the end of the year? Or does he stick it out in Laval until the end of the season?
I think it'll be before the end of this year with him. There's been so much hype around this player. I think it's smart for them to start him in Laval, let him get used to making the jump to pro, because it's a completely different game from NCAA hockey that he's used to. He is a smaller guy, and it's going to be a little bit of some growing pains that people are going to have to deal with. He also has to finish homework for his semester. I like that he mentioned that in his video call as well. But I'm just really hopeful that there's going to be more patience when it comes to Cole Caufield. Remember how excited everyone got when Ryan Poehling got called up for that final game of the season against the Toronto Maple Leafs? He scored the hat trick and the shootout goal as well. Give this player time to develop into that player. And if he doesn't come out guns blazing, then that's okay, because that's an adjustment that young players have to have.
And every player, makes the change or the jump in different ways. Some players take a little bit longer. Some grab the opportunity and have an impact right away, and have a future. And I mean, Caufield, here's a kid that, when you watch him play, the kid is quite impressive, obviously, in his ability to create stuff offensively. And I'm thinking that they're going to let him have a taste of what the American League is all about. If he does excel there and he does make a lot of good things happen and feels, that he's comfortable being able to perform at that level, why not give him a chance to come up? And it's a short season down the stretch here, and see what he can do, and see if he can be that guy that can make the difference between a 2-1 hockey game by doing what he does best, and a real sniper that is going to be interesting to see the transition for him moving forward. But obviously that skill set and that ability to score goals is nothing but a huge asset for the Canadiens.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if we don't see him with the Canadiens for at least a couple of games before the end of the season. As much as Canadiens fans are excited to see what he can do, Marc Bergevin, I'm sure, is excited to see what he can do. Jeff Molson's excited to see what he can do. Watching him in his last game with University of Wisconsin when they were eliminated there, his team was down in the third period. He comes out and scores 2 goals. He's a marked man. Playoff game before that, he scores in overtime. He was on the ice for the 6 minutes of overtime. He played more than half of it. He's a goal scorer. And the Canadiens can use some help there. It's been a long time since the Canadiens had a natural goal scorer. So, sending him to Laval is, I wrote a column about this. It's a smart move, because don't forget, he's going through 7-day quarantine. So he won't have been on the ice for over a week. So let him, go to Laval, get a few games under his feet, see how he does there. I would imagine he was going to score there, because he's scored everywhere else he's ever been. And then you can bring him up and see what he can do with the Canadiens. So I'm just imagining that shot on the power play. Wow, if you have Shea Weber on one side and him on the other side, that's pretty dangerous. The kid just knows how to score. That shot is elite level, elite NHL level already. Of course, the big question mark with him is his size, 5'7". He said he's up to 170 pounds now after working out in the weight room at Wisconsin. But he's been told he's too small at every level of hockey he's ever played, and he's scored at every level of hockey he's ever played. I'd be surprised if he doesn't score at the NHL level, just because of that shot is just elite, and he knows how to find open ice. So again, I'd be surprised if we don't see him for at least a couple of games. And if he comes up and he looks overmatched, you send him back to Laval. And this has been a weird season too. Don't forget, with COVID. So if it looks like he's not ready, you can send him back to Laval next season, have him start what will hopefully be more of a regular season by then, if we're somewhat over this COVID situation by then. But to me, call him up, see what he can do, and let him show what he can do also. Marc Bergevin likes to say players decide where they're going to play. Let Cole Caufield decide where he's going to play.
And it's going to be...
go ahead.
just how he handles the schedule because of how tight the Habs schedule is now to finish the season. And Cole Caufield is used to playing where you don't play that many games in U.S. college. So I think that would be another adjustment too for him, and another reason why it's good that they didn't just kind of throw him in to the Habs lineup right away.
And with his the bonus of his ability to speak French by hearing the Allons-y comment, maybe that will cater to some other people in the organization, which is great.
I know a lot of people love that. I know with my own personal philosophy on prospects and younger players, I think the more time they get to adjust in the minor leagues, the better for them. I think it benefits them in the long run. I'll say this about Cole Caufield, and I'll say this about the Canadiens. I think that it would be cool to see him play near the end of the year, but I think that should have to do with how well the Canadiens will have played to that point. We know with the schedule, it's going to be very tough for them going forward, but the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks, two teams who I thought might have taken advantage of that week where the Montreal Canadiens didn't play and catch up and make some ground, they didn't, and they're falling further behind in the standings. So while it might be a little boring for viewers to watch the North Division and be like, oh, well, we already know who the 4 teams are in the playoffs, I would imagine if you're the Montreal Canadiens and you pretty much know that you're going to be in the playoffs, it kind of gives you, a bit more of a leash to kind of say, you know what, hey, we'll play Cole Caufield in these games. He's looked okay in the American Hockey League. We can play these games that don't really matter in the scheme of things here. Maybe a point or two here can get us into third or fourth, whatever, but we don't have to worry about being in the playoffs, or not being in the playoffs, I should say.
And giving a kid a taste of the NHL is only going to make him hungrier. You look at Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and, when he was sent down to Laval last year after having a big taste of NHL life, he didn't want to stay in the AHL for long. He wanted to come back up, and, he's played very well since then. So the other thing, Caufield, he's a confident kid. He knows that he's confident in his abilities, and I don't think he's going to be overwhelmed getting called up to the NHL. And again, if he does look overwhelmed after a couple of games, you can send him back to Laval.
That'll do it for this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. If you have a question you'd like to see us answer, leave it in the comments section below, and visit hockeyinsideout.com to check out full episodes and other comment sections where you can write all of your thoughts on Cole Caufield and Eric Staal and the Montreal Canadiens, and I guess me and how my mic sounds. It worked. It worked this week. Yeah, so visit hockeyinsideout.com.